So even more news has been hitting about Civilization 7. We got some more leaders that are confirmed and a little bit more about the era system. And that's basically what I wanted to discuss today because that is still the main focus that everyone seems to be discussing. Well, that and the fact that the leaders look really weird. I love the art style. I love that Civ 7 has gone back to kind of like a more Civ 5 visual, at least the gameplay. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the way all the leaders are looking. They look really weird. I don't know why that is. Why does Civ 5 leaders look better slightly than the Civ 7 one? But anyway, that's beside the point. One thing I want to say before we get into it, I think that just like what I would have done for Civ 7, I probably would have, like personally, if I was a developer, because in my previous Civ 7 video, when I was discussing my thoughts on playing the first like 100 turns of the game and my own experiences in, getting a hands-on preview, before anyone else and just talking about that, I really like the concept. And if I was the developers, I would have just gone with the idea of leader swapping. I think that's great. I think being able to choose like, Genghis Khan to be able to lead the United States would have been enough innovation for me if I was one of the developers to say like, okay, that's as far we're gonna go. I think the arrow system is where that's where most people are concerned, and I think that's where possibly if they do go too far, it's for that mechanic. I feel like a lot of people are cool with leader swapping. I just gave the example of Genghis Khan leading the United States or Julius Caesar. Because that makes sense even from a historical standpoint. Look at the way that Napoleon is argued as being Italian. What if he, ruled over Italy instead? Italy was all divided at that time. It'd be kind of complicated. But look at Stalin coming from Georgia, or a certain mustache man coming from Austria. Like, leader swapping is fairly, plausible in like the alternative history community. It's not that hard to imagine. Obviously, Genghis Khan leading the United States is a crazy one, but I like that idea. And that's a mechanic that I'm actually excited about. But the era swapping or swapping civs, not so much. Now, they have said that when you're playing the AI will mostly choose a historical path. Like if there's 3 different Japans, Japan will remain Japan. But that's just one example of a nation that can do that. Japan, a lot of nations won't be able to have that historical paths. Like France, they got to become the Normans, and then what were they before that? The Gauls or something like that. There has to be a switch. And the main reason why I'm making this video is really to discuss like my biggest issue when games do this, when 4X games, Humankind specifically, did this. I really get thrown off. I need there to be some sort of visual like symbol that will be retained by each civ throughout my campaign in my game. So like, and we don't know exactly how it's going to be done yet, or maybe we do, but the thing about Humankind was it was like, oh, this neighbor that was to the south of me who was formerly, it doesn't really matter, I don't know, a Native American civilization is now the Normans, because I just brought up the Normans, and their colors change, their names change, their icons change. So it completely disorientates me, and I'm like, whoa, like, who is this now below me? And I have to figure out that, and that's just one example. That's just the civ that was to the south of me, and then there's the civ that's to the west of me that also had a complete name change and a color change, and I don't remember exactly if all these things happened in Humankind, but I just know that the name change was enough to throw me off. And it's like if there was at least the colors that could stay the same, or if an icon, or maybe you label every civilization with the leader. You lead with the leader, if that makes sense. Like if Genghis Khan is to the south of me, stay with Genghis Khan. Even if their civ name is changing, just when I do a tooltip, when my mouse is hovering over a unit that I see that's near my borders, if the tooltip just still tells me like, oh, Genghis Khan throughout the entire game, okay, I can be able to figure out, I'll be able to know where that is on the map. It sucks when you're in the middle of a game and the whole map is like, everyone changes names, everyone changes colors, all this stuff. It's like, what happened? Like that is what complicates me. And that completely takes me out of the world that I was building inside of my head before that. Maybe, they might have made announcements here and there. Again, in my own Civilization playthrough, I didn't get to an era change. I don't think anyone got to an era change, so we don't know exactly how that's going to take place. Obviously, the buildings are going to change. I'm less worried about that. I'm less worried about having it doesn't really matter if my neighbor to the south had buildings change. That's not a big deal. It's the orientation on the map that I was building in my head and the colors and all that stuff and the names that are changing. Luckily, the leaders, I believe, will stay the same, right? But that's the biggest thing. I need that to be some sort of through point. I still have problems with it, though. I have to admit. Luckily, it's only 3 era changes, so this means it's only going to be like 3 different civ changes. Another question I kind of have is, what if all the civs end up becoming the same civ by era 3? For example, France, because there's plenty of paths to get to France, or probably maybe to Britain. Because they all share a similar origin story with Roman. When you start off as the Romans, that's going to be able to. There's multiple paths you can end up choosing, but what if the AI? They said that the AI is going to try to remain historical, but what does that is it possible to just be Rome, Rome, Rome? So does everyone? If that's the case, is it always just Rome, or does Rome change to the Normans, and then does everyone choose France? Or some people ended up. I think there's a cap where you can only pick one. I kind of go back and forth about this, the idea of going with non-historical leaders of nations. I think that could be very cool. I think that could cause a lot of controversy. That is a big fear of mine, because that means that you can choose anyone to lead any civ. And that seems like a recipe for disaster. I probably would do the same thing too, because you can introduce a lot of leaders that have never been in a Civilization game before, obviously. But it could backfire, because that could mean. I guess you're introducing leaders, and the leaders can lead any civ, so I guess it's not too bad. But if you associate too much with a controversial leader choice to represent historically a certain civilization, yeah, that could get kind of messy. So we're going to have to see about that. Obviously, we're going to be seeing as we have a long time before the game actually releases, so it's going to take a minute. It's going to be a lot of releases for not only leaders, but also civs that we can play as, whether it's in the early game, the mid game, or the late game. So there's a bunch of things that are coming out about that. The most memorable game of Civilization I've literally ever played, which sadly was never on camera. This was before I was really making Civilization content here on YouTube. It was in Civ 5, so it was just before I started making content. I was on a massive Pangea map, and I was cornered off. I had this big mountain range that protected me with. There was only one pass. So it was big Pangea, and there's this big mountain range, and I was smashed in the corner, hidden behind a mountain range, and only one pass to get through. And there just so happened to be a city-state that was kind of controlling that pass, but was on the vast majority of the city-state's territory, and the main city itself was on the other side of the mountain range, connected with all the other civs. It was a really unique, procedurally generated map. I've never seen a procedurally generated civ game like that before. So I decided to play extremely tall because I didn't have that much land to work with. I think I only had 3 cities. I think I might have been Greece or something like that. Well, anyways, I can't really tell what's going on over that mountain range that much. I didn't do really much exploration. I can kind of just see, that city-state and then a couple other surrounding civs next to it. And slowly as I'm playing the game, I see one by one each civ get taken out by the Mongolian Empire. Boom, boom, boom. And I just see this monster force that is beginning to take over the entire map until they eventually do. We get to the modern era, and it's just me and Mongolia and this one city-state that is controlling this massive wall that's protecting me, because I didn't have much of a military. I was going for a science victory. I was just trying to, I saw the mountain, so I'm like, oh, I think I'll be okay. I don't even really need to build a military. I think I'll be safe behind this range here. Well, anyways, of course, Mongolia goes after that city-state that's controlling this pass, and I knew that if that city-state fell, I'm a goner. They're gonna roll in with all their horses. Well, it was a modern age, so they're gonna roll in with all their tanks, and they're probably going to end me. So this is the one time, probably the best example I ever used of gifting city-states units. I never really gifted a whole lot of units in Civ 5 to city-states, but in this scenario, I was like, this is the best plan. So I was like building units and just boom, gifting, just so the city-state could be able to defend itself. And it surprisingly was doing a pretty good job, even though the AI is obviously very dumb and it struggled. Sometimes just having those units as physical bodies would stop the Mongolian AI from getting too close. So I did that for like a whole era or two. Again, era from back in Civ 5 days, or, age, or, it wasn't like there wasn't this big change. It was just, it was just through that science timeline, basically. But finally, that city-state did fall, but it was okay. So the Mongolians, bam, took it over, and just like I thought, they started coming through that pass. I could defend myself. I was gifting so many units to that city-state, though I really didn't have many other units left. So even though there was like a choke point and it was like a 300 moment, like a 300 Spartan moment where maybe I could be able to fight them, I was not going to be able. I just didn't have really much of a military at all, maybe like 2 units. But it didn't really matter because when the Mongolians did start flooding through that pass and they did declare war on me, I had already won a space victory. And I just built this story in my head. There's an article somewhere written somewhere on the internet because I told some reporter about this game, I think for the release of Civ 6. I won by my science victory, and I imagine the spaceship was named after that city-state that flew into space, like in their honor, because they were the reason why my Greek civilization stayed alive. I think it was Toronto or something like that. So like SS Toronto or something. I don't know, whatever space name. And that's what I imagine my spaceship was called as we won the game. So that was my honor of them, and that's just like I've never forgot that campaign. And that's like the beautiful thing about Civilization is that you will have games like that you'll never forget because they're just so memorable. Not every game is very memorable. I mean, dang, I've played so many games of Civ that I have no idea what happened. That's the only one I can really remember very clearly, and I don't even really know why. I thought it was funny. I just had built this whole lore in my head, and that's the biggest thing that Civ 7 needs to have. If I cannot build lore like that in my head, then, it's not a failure, but it's a failure compared to the previous versions, I guess you could say. And that was the thing is that was the Mongolian Empire that was taking over all of those civs one by one by one. And if the Mongolian Empire is switching throughout the campaign, is that going to be as memorable? Is that going to feel as big of a threat that Genghis is literally breathing down my neck and I've got to feed Toronto a bunch of units to keep me safe from the Mongolian horde that is building up? So that is my worry. Is it going to feel the same if it's Mongolia that eventually turns into France, that eventually turns into, well, I guess France would be a late game Civ, but is that going to feel the same? Is that going to take me out of things? What am I going to call that? Do I just say that Genghis Khan had an empire? That's easy. It's a little bit harder and a little bit, I think a part of the reason why I remember that story so much is it is Mongolia, and that's what they did historically. And it's like, oh my God, they're repeating the past. They're doing it again. They're doing it here in my game. So if they are switching, does it still feel like that? I think that's the reason why I remember that scenario so much, is because of the link it has to real history, and they were doing it in my game. So yeah, like I said, the AIs are apparently choosing historical paths if you want them to. So hopefully that's the case, but I just felt like I really wanted to give that anecdotal example to express, my concerns, but hopefully that's not. I hope the game releases. I'm excited to play it either way. I'm still going to play it because I really want to know what this is going to be like.